My name is Susan Carland. I am an academic at Monash University in Australia, where I specialise in sociology of religion and Islam and Muslims in Australia. I think the answer is both. I think from what I've seen and what I've observed and the friends that I have that are Malaysian, that there are Malaysian people who are very connected and involved in the broader Australian community, the broader Australian Muslim community, some of them who are leaders in those communities, and then there are others who understandably like to spend a lot of time with other Malaysians, and I can understand that. I think it makes sense that you want to be with people who speak the same language as you, eat the same great food as you, have the same cultural practices. And I think particularly if for Malaysians who are maybe more recently arrived, maybe they've just arrived in Australia for study or work, they are much more likely to want to be with other Malaysians, which makes sense. I don't think that's a problem, but certainly there are a lot of Malaysians who are very connected and integrated into the Australian society as well. I think a lot of it depends on how long they've been in Australia. I think the biggest factor is time, really. It's really how long they've been in Australia, how comfortable they feel, which makes a lot of sense. If you are a Malaysian Australian who perhaps was born in Australia, but both of your parents are Malaysian Australian, obviously that plays a big role as well. Maybe if you migrated when you were a child, you're going to feel more connected just by virtue of being in Australia for a long time. So I think the things that help, A, is time, but B, I think having a positive experience with other local Australians and realising that Australians love Malaysians. Australians have such a positive view of Malaysian people. You're seen as very friendly, very warm. We love Malaysian food. So I think the more positive interactions that Malaysians have with Australians as well, the more they'll feel like Australia is home as well. I think, look, literacy helps in every area. It certainly doesn't hurt. I think literacy would definitely play a role, but I think a big part of it is how welcome you feel in a society. And the more welcome and accepted you feel by the locals, the more relaxed you're going to feel, the more you feel you can connect with the people around you. And probably beyond literacy, it's language. If a Malaysian person feels comfortable speaking English and speaking English to other Australians, that's going to be the number one bridge between. If you can just talk to someone, that's the number one bridge.
Okay, moving on, I'm going to focus a little bit more on yourself and your achievement. So basically in 2022, you were a national finalist in the Australian Financial Review's Emerging Leader in Higher Education Award. So could you tell us about what have you done and how we, the readers, can learn or practice in becoming food educators?
That's a good question. Look, it was a surprise to me when I was a national finalist. No, and I think, and I mean, maybe that is also part of being a leader, is I think we should be, I don't know that leadership is always something that we should be looking to achieve. I think the person who always wants to put themselves out the front and be in control, I think that's maybe someone we should be a little bit suspicious of. There's nothing wrong with wanting to lead people and make a positive contribution in society, but I think we need to be careful about anyone, including ourselves, that seem to just want leadership positions because we like being at the front and we like people taking notice of us and we like to be in control. I think an ideal leader is someone that wants to bring people along with them and wants to empower the people that are with them so that those people actually feel like they are their achievements. It's not about the leader per se, it's about the whole group, and that's kind of the best approach to leadership I think we should take. I think, how did I feel? I felt quite uneasy, I have to say, in terms of the 500 most influential Muslims in the world, because again, I think it's one of those roles that no one should be trying to seek out for themselves. If someone's trying to be influential, I don't know, I automatically feel a bit uneasy about it. I think the goal should be good work with a pure intention. And if other people find you influential, then that's wonderful. But I don't think it should be about just trying to be influential, because you can be a bad influence. Yeah. And many people are. So I think if we think about influence, in the end, all any of us should be trying to do is be a positive influence, but focusing on the work we do and not whether the people around us are championing us or not. And in terms of being the Muslim Leader of Tomorrow nomination, or that, the reason that was amazing was because it meant that I was funded to go and meet with big group of other sort of emerging Muslim leaders around the world, and I met some phenomenal people that I am still in contact with today who are amazing achievers. And it just gave me so much hope about the future of the Muslim world. There are so many amazing people doing amazing things who care about our communities, who care about our faith, and want to make a positive contribution in the world. But also, I think with these titles, it's also really important to remember, and I think this is the case for all of us, we all know amazing leaders and people that we look up to, and, you know, they're leading companies or organizations or doing great work, and that's great. But so often I think the people who are doing some of the most remarkable and important work are the people doing it behind the scenes. No one's giving them a trophy or an award or putting them on a list, but it's actually the most profound and important work that's been done, often quite humbly. And I think it's important that we never place too much value on these lists or awards, because it can give you a very skewed idea about what's important and the kind of people that are important. There are definitely significant differences which have been really interesting for me to note. I think the first one is that Muslims are a real minority in Australia. Only 3.2% of the population is Muslim in Australia. So about 800,000 people. Compare that to here in Malaysia, I think it's about 64% of the population is Muslim. That's, you know, tens of millions of people. That makes a big difference in terms of how you feel about your place in society and the role the religion plays. So I think that plays a big role. And also the Australian Muslim community is really multicultural. We come from 183 different cultural backgrounds, just the Muslim community in Australia. And that obviously has a huge impact on how we do Islam, because you think about how differently Islam is practiced around the world. Compare Malaysian Islam to Turkish Islam, or to Nigerian Islam, or to Saudi Islam. You know, they are very culturally specific, and we have all of those cultures bringing their Islam to Australia. So when I stand at the mosque to pray, I've got an Egyptian woman on one side of me, a Turkish woman on the other, an Indonesian woman's in front of me, I have a Somali imam. That has a big impact, and it forces us to grapple with these different ways of being Muslim and these different interpretations of what Islam is. So it's very diverse. And I suppose just in a more specific example, just being here in Ramadan has been really interesting to hear, to my surprise, just some of the things that I took for granted in Australia and assumed that all Muslims did in Ramadan, because I've never been in a Muslim country for Ramadan. And I was talking to some local Muslims and saying how, you know, in Australia, what's very common is people will host big iftars at their house. So we regularly have 20, 30 people at a house for iftar, many nights in Ramadan. And the people I was speaking to say, well, we don't really do that in Malaysia. You won't really invite people to your house to break fast. You might take them out to a restaurant, or people will just eat at home alone and then they'll go to the mosque for Taraweeh. And the big visiting days are Hari Raya. Which we will have people come over, but the iftars are the big things. And I just assumed all Muslims around the world hosted big iftars at their house. So that was, I was like, so this is quite an Australian thing, which I didn't realize. And I guess it makes sense, because in Australia, unlike here, like, it's been interesting to be here. I see things start when you're getting close to Maghrib. The traffic gets really bad. Everyone's trying to get home or trying to get to the restaurant. People are going to the markets. And what was also interesting is at the markets, what I assumed would happen, because this is what happened. We have one Ramadan market in Sydney. And what people do is at Maghrib, they will go to the market to break their fast. So they'll buy the food, everyone stands around, we all eat, they just roll carpets out in the street, we all pray Maghrib together outside. And so everyone's there till, you know, like 1 a.m., 2 a.m., they pray Taraweeh, it's all out there. So I assumed that was what was happening. And so when we were going to the market yesterday, I'm like, it's only 5:30, why are we going now? And they're like, oh, because by like 7 o'clock it's wrapping up. And I'm like, you mean you don't eat at the market? And they're like, no, we take it home. So it's just little things, like none of these make any difference religiously, obviously, but just the different way these things are done was a real surprise and really interesting to see. Yeah. I mean, I think anyone who's watching the images unfold would find it devastating. It's a horrifying sight that we are seeing. And I also think we need to be aware that seeing those unrelenting, horrific images, it has a damage on us. Like, we are not designed to see that level of awfulness all the time. And I think it's really affecting, understandably, a lot of people. Many people are just horrified, but of all backgrounds and all beliefs and all communities are devastated by it. So I think, that's the reality, and certainly that is how I feel, is just aghast and speechless really at the situation. And in terms of the media, so I'm on the board of the Islamophobia Register Australia, and what we found is from the October 7 attacks on Israel, a big spike in Islamophobia in cases in Australia, 1,300% increase in Islamophobia. And one of the things we found with those reports was that people started also saying to us, we feel like there's been a blatant bias in some of the reporting of the conflict. And so we decided to investigate to see if this was actually happening. And we just did a very preliminary report. We certainly didn't analyse all of the Australian media. I mean, it would have been a massive undertaking to do that. So we did a really a very focused initial analysis, just looking at a broad spectrum of Australian news outlets, the posts that they were putting on Instagram specifically. So we didn't look at like their TV or radio, we didn't look at their newspapers. The reasons we focused on social media is because what we know now from research is that actually social media is where the majority of people across the world, across all age groups, get their news from. They actually get it from social media before going to a news site or a newspaper or anything like that. So we knew that these posts were playing a really important role in how the average Australian was understanding the conflict. And we just wanted to see if there was balance or bias or not. And without going through all the research, people are welcome. It's free. It's available online. I encourage people to read it. But we did find that there was, particularly with certain news outlets, a staggering lack of balance, a pronounced, unquestionable, shocking level of balance. Some were much more balanced than others, and it's important to state that it's not like this was across the board, but some were a very confronting and really inexcusable lack of balance in their reporting. And I think it's also important to point out at this point that we were looking for balance in a very unequal and unbalanced conflict. So even looking for balance, I think, is something that should cause us to pause. But yet that is what we look for. And the fact that certain news outlets didn't even achieve that, I think is really something that they need to be held accountable for. I think, so in the research that I've done, I was hoping, and I've gone overseas, I've had fellowships overseas to try to find the best, most effective ways to counter Islamophobia. And when I went on these research fellowships, I went hopeful that there would be one solution, that there would be one thing that I would uncover and go, oh, if we just do this one thing, then everything will be great. That was not the case. There is no silver bullet to fix prejudice. But what I did find is that because Islamophobia comes from different places in people. People feel negative towards Islam or Muslims for different reasons. There are going to need to be different ways to address it. For some people, it will simply be that they have literally, and this is the case in Australia, they have literally never met a Muslim. They have never spoken to a Muslim before in their lives. So the only source of information they're getting about Islam is from the media, which is not always a nuanced account, let's put it that way. And so for some people, they just need to meet a Muslim and be like, oh, wow, you're a human like me, and, you love your children, and you go shopping, and, you're not this scary monster. That can be enough. For other people, they actually want and need to learn about, say, the teachings of Islam, to go, well, what do you actually believe? Is it this terrible, scary religion of death that I've been made to believe? Things like that. So there needs to be a really multi-pronged approach, because different people are coming from different places. One of the most important things I will say, though, is that I know people talk about this a lot, so it will seem trite or cliche, but we cannot underestimate the role that social media plays in these things. And that's not just about Islamophobia. That's about prejudice and bigotry and hatred of lots of different types of people. I really think we should be calling them social misery companies because of the damage that they are causing in society. Because not only do they spread misinformation unchecked, the algorithms are designed to keep people in a certain way of thinking. to protect us from actually learning from people that are different to us or even being exposed to different ideas. And so once that happens, once we are only in our own worldview and never consider the perspective of other people, it's then very easy to dehumanize people that we think of as different to us and to assume that they can only have their opinions because they're evil or stupid. If we are forced to keep encountering people who have different ideas to us, even if we don't agree with them, we can still have a conversation, learn what you think, and still go, I still disagree, but at least we've understood them. That's the only way that we'll be able to live together as a cohesive society, not by only staying with people who only agree with us and only tell us what we want to think and just keep reinforcing our own beliefs to us. Okay, well, there's a lot to get through in that last question. Well, in terms of the things that I'm excited to do, pretty much everything. I love Malaysia. I keep trying to convince my husband that we should move here. So I'm a big fan of this country. I love everything about it. I love the people. I love the experiences. I love the mosques. I love the weather. I love the food. You can do no wrong in my eyes. So I'm enthusiastic about everything. And in terms of the message, I guess, that I would convey to Malaysians is that I think, sort of reiterating what I've said, that I don't know if Malaysians realise how fondly Australians view them. You're one of our very close neighbours. We have such a long history with Malaysia as well. I think longer than people realise that our trade relationships, for a very long time have existed, and cultural trade. I would love it if we were closer friends as neighbours. The more travel, please come and visit us. I've come to you, so I think it's now your turn to come to Melbourne. I can host you for iftar at my house. One of the iftars. I guess it sort of gets back to what I was saying before, is that the way that we have flourishing societies, and that's just not in our own countries and communities, but globally, is that we have to get to know each other. And that's a verse in the Quran. That's exactly what Allah says. I made you into nations and tribes so that you would get to know one another. So we can also see that this is like a religious requirement. We need to get to know each other. So please come and visit us. You can pada koala. We'll come and visit you, eat your great food. And I think that would be great.